start. It is live. So, Bill Pohlad, welcome to Utah Valley University. We just got done watching Love and Mercy. We've got a good group here. What do you guys think of it? Hey. Here's our group. I can turn it around and you can sort of see them. There's about 40 people in here. 50 maybe. So, medium-sized. So,
good to be here.
So what?
Good to be here or there or somewhere in between.
Yes, and thanks for staying up late for us. Really appreciate it. So I'm going to start off asking you a few questions. Little biographical stuff first, and then a little bit about the movie, and then we'll turn it over to them. So I'm a producer. I've produced a bunch of films, and I just recently, like within the past couple of years, directed my first feature as a director. And that is your path as well. And I believe, not knowing a ton about you, but I believe you first got into film via finance or something along those lines. And it's not often that those guys always end up being such great filmmakers. Can you tell me just a little bit about your background and your launching into film, and then from there, how you ended up. And then we'll talk about this project specifically. So
Okay.
kind of the life before it.
Absolutely. Actually, I did start off as a writer-director.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my kind of original passion. I actually didn't go to film school or anything. I went to actually Gonzaga University of Liberal Arts College in Spokane, Washington, and they didn't have a film program and whatever. I just kind of did business, accounting and economics and all. But I always had this passion for film. So when I got out of college, I started working in advertising as a copywriter, which I thought was the closest thing I could come up with to, doing something creative. So I did that, and in my spare time, I started writing scripts. Didn't know what I was doing at all. Just kind of not having any formal training. I just tried to find my way through it. Long process writing my first script and all, but went through it and had some not success with it, but I was able to finish my first screenplay and kind of had some people look at it. As time went on and I was still working in business, I eventually met two other guys who wanted to make movies out of Minneapolis, actually, and so we formed River Road. That was back in like '87.
Oh, wow.
And we made a film right off the bat. Didn't know what we were doing again at all. But I ended up co-producing with them and then directing it. Big disaster for me anyway. I feel like it represented what I wanted to do at all. But, we were way in over our heads at one of that kind of thing. And it didn't go well. It got a release and it was on Showtime a lot. But we never saw any money back for our investors and all that. And so it was, I spent the next 10 years really trying to get another feature going, but mostly doing documentary and commercial work, which was fine, but it really wasn't, I really wanted to make another movie. So eventually I put my directing and writing on hold and started focusing on more the business side, the producing side and the financing side. And that's where kind of actually things started to take off and that we had some success right off the bat and helped a lot, jump-starting things. So.
All right, great. So, wow, River Road's been around for a long time then.
Yeah.
So that's great.
I mean, its current version where it really was working with bigger feature films, that's only been since 2000, so about, 15 years.
Right. Okay, and then this project, suddenly you're directing again. How did it come? First of all, how did the project come about? I mean, it's a huge project in terms of collaborating with Brian, right? I mean, it's not anyone could walk off the street and get that. So can you talk a little bit about your access and how that came about, and then how it was decided? I mean, was this something that you were maybe shopping around as a producer and then eventually decided to direct, or was this all from the beginning? This was your project, and just kind of how that all worked out for you?
Yeah, again, I mean, it was helpful on the producing and financing side, River Road, and I had some success by that point. We had done Mountain and Tree of Life and all that in a while. so we had, you know, a name. People knew us at that point. But I had kept my desire to get back into directing very quiet. I didn't like the idea of the producer who wants to be the you know, director. That's kind of always bad. So I kept it quiet. We were developing another project for me to direct kind of very quietly. When the Brian Wilson thing came along, there was another group that was trying to get the movie made, had been working on it for a long time and hadn't been able to get much success in it. And they brought it to us and asked if we wanted to partner on it. And so I said yes. I've always, didn't grow up to be a Brian Wilson, you know, fanatic or anything like that, but I love his music.
Yeah.
And I just took to it very much. And I started working with a writer. As a producer, I started working with, you know, interviewing writers, and we ended up getting in touch with a guy by the name of Oren Moverman, who had done a number of things before and had written I'm Not There and did some of his own things. And he and I sat down together and we just hit it off, like connected right away on what the movie should be and the vision for it. We started working very closely together, developing the script. And I had thought that he might be a candidate for directing. And as we went along, he turned to me at one point and said, you know, you should direct this. You're the one who's kind of got the vision for it and driving it. And so at that point, you know, it didn't take a lot of arm twisting. Not bad.
I think it's an exceptionally well directed film. Are you developing new projects for you to direct?
Yep.
The cat's out of the bag, in other words.
Yeah. No, I mean, thankfully it went over well. I mean, the industry, I think, received the film well, and so it got over some of those humps as you're talking about the producer who, or, you know, ends up being the director. I think that's mostly gone now. But nevertheless, even though, again, River Road has made a lot of movies and Love and Mercy was successful, it's not easy ever to make a movie. I hate to say that to all the movie, you know, aspirants out there, but all these little
eager and, you know, unjaded folks here, they're like, what?
Well, I mean, yeah, you kind of think, oh, you're going to make it at one point and it's going to be really easy. But every project, unfortunately, and fortunately, is tough. It's like starting a new business. And despite all the success, the next project that I had actually discovered while I was working on Love and Mercy, Oren and I worked on that script as well. Went out and got a cast, and pretty good cast, you know, Jeff Bridges and Paul Dano, but it was a tough movie dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. And we actually ended up not being able to put the financing together. We're still working on it, but we had to move on, and now we're working on a couple other projects, both with Oren and independently. So we'll see. You know, it's a very tough business. So, but a good one. So
absolutely. Oh, got it. Echo here. I hope that doesn't. What can I do? Here, why don't I don't know, turn that down? Yeah, just turn it down, and it seemed to work. Although now we might not be able to hear you, Bill. Say something. No, we can't. Okay. Yeah, it seemed to work. Okay. You can hear me?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Now, quick question. You're calling us from Minneapolis. Mm-hmm. That's of all our CineSKypes, we've never had a Minneapolis person. Now we live in Utah, and a lot of our students end up staying here. There's a good film, there's work for filmmakers here and film crews. Tell me a little bit about living outside of LA, and I'm sure you're back and forth a ton, but and about that choice, and about just, you know, what that's like, what that's all about.
Well, it's not easy, to be honest. I mean, particularly when you're just starting. In a lot of ways, it's a relationship business. You want to believe it's all about the work, and it is. You know, it's all about whatever if you're a writer or director or producer or whatever, it's about that. But you really also need to make connections. You need to network and meet people. Clearly, the easiest way to do that in some ways is being in Los Angeles with a lot of other people who are trying to do the same thing. Of course, there's a downside to that too, where there's so many people out there trying to do it, you just get buried. But whatever, I didn't kind of try to work that out too much. I just simply had, from the very beginning, since I was really young, as much as I loved film, I didn't really want to move to Los Angeles. So it was some kind of innate thing that just made me not want to. So we struggled, you know, after we made that first film back in the late 80s and early 90s. It was a struggle to get the next one going, just because I didn't know that many people. We had made a movie and it wasn't successful in my mind, but you know, it was a little toehold. But it didn't really, you know, it was hard to get something else going. That's why I ended up spending like 10 years just doing commercial and other things, whatever I could to keep the doors open. But so it isn't easy, but it can be done. You know, certainly other people, I mean, certainly from Minnesota, you know, the Coen brothers and people like that, you know, it can be done. And certainly in other pockets of the country, there's been a lot of success stories, but it's just not as easy. So, but I like it. I mean, I think it's good. I mean, you can get into the industry in Los Angeles and it becomes very incestuous. Like people talking about all these ideas and they all think it's a great idea. I mean, to be honest, I get caught up in that too. And then you come back to Minneapolis or wherever you're from and you suddenly realize once you get in the home, it's kind of like, that's a terrible idea. Well,
for some reason it works in LA, but everywhere else it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, back to Love and Mercy. At one point I heard you say, I think in the commentary, you mentioned that this is a movie about sound. And one of the things that just kind of I love about this movie is the sonic landscape. And so can you tell me a little bit about the sound design and about Atticus Ross and where his great composing and his kind of adaptation of Brian's music, and then the original score and the sound effects, where those they cross over all the time in your movie, and just kind of the process of it and how much of it's scripted, and that whole kind of address that whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, first of all, general comment, you know, some projects, you know, are tough, very tough, and it's a slog through the whole thing. And some projects seem like they're blessed almost. And this was kind of a blessed project. A lot of it had to do with Brian, a lot of it had to do just simply the music and all. But it attracted a lot of people. I mean, I kind of had my pick of people who wanted to be involved because there's a lot of big Brian Wilson fans out there. But what I wanted from the beginning was, you know, it's all about what Brian suffers from or whatever, part of his genius, part of his kind of nightmare or whatever, is that he hears these things in his head and he has auditory hallucinations, really. So I wanted to somehow convey that in the sound, and we had that whole notion that's in the script, that's in the film at the beginning of this opening where you just hear all these snatches of things and little bits of things going on in his head, and that's what's going on in Brian's head. And so I knew I wanted to get that, and despite great other musicians that wanted to be involved, I was attracted to Atticus because he came from a kind of a producing background, and obviously with Trent and everything, a lot of unusual things with their material. So we sat down together and he got it immediately. You know, unlike other people, he didn't want to compete with Brian by trying to do, you know, something in honor of him. Instead, we started talking about the oral hallucinations, but we also started talking about trying to, instead of composing things that would fight with Brian's score or try to compete with it, it was like trying to use parts of Brian's music and rearrange it and make new compositions out of it. So we connected on that right away, and it was just kind of a progression from then. It just, I mean, it was super fun to work with, to be honest. And then through the whole thing, Atticus was amazing. And then getting into the mix, you know, I could have been in that mix for the next 3 years, just because it's so fun to sit there and play with all those sounds and work.
Sure. Yeah, it's just really, I was really kind of in here for a long time just saying, oh, our sound system isn't, I wish we had a better, a system to hear this, because I just hearing it so great. Okay, last question for me. A lot of these people, these are young people who probably aren't entirely aware of Brian and his, how significant he is. But you also in creating the script were very true to him, and there's a lot of collaboration. A lot of these scenes happened the way you show them, and so while there's dramatization, there's also very, like, the scene in the studio at the end. You actually not only did that happen, but you filmed there. And so can you just kind of talk about the importance of that, and so that they know that, so that they don't ask you that and you have to tell them again?
Yeah, no, yeah, you kind of want to. Again, there's a lot of people out there that are big Brian Wilson fans, and Beach Boy fans or whatever. But I wasn't really interested in making a movie for them. I mean, you want it to be for them, but you also want it to be accessible to people who know nothing about Brian or nothing about the Beach Boys.
Right.
I mean, for all our movies, that's one of the goals, is that it means something 40 years from now, and that it's still a story about human beings, not some celebrity thing.
Right.
So it was important to honor his legacy and his work, but it was also important just to kind of get to the human side of it. And so it was difficult. I mean, because he does suffer from this mental illness, and so it wasn't always easy to interact with him. But he was with us, and he was on board with the film. His wife, Melinda, was very helpful in the process as well, because you're trying to navigate what he experiences in his life even now. And that's part of his genius. All the voices he hears, all that, that all played a part in the genius of the music that he ended up coming up with the Beach Boys, and then later on his own. I think again, I don't know how much you want me to expound on Brian Wilson, but I think today you can go to
the movie tells us a lot about Brian Wilson, but just
but I mean, even today a lot of the artists, you can just talk to so many artists of today, and they will reference Brian as being one of their inspirations. He's just had a lot of impact.
I had growing up, I was a big Beatles fan and had listened to the Beach Boys like as a younger child. But once I kind of was like early teens, I found, or right around 11 or so, I found the Beatles. And my dad would always say, when the Beatles came out, I always said the Beach Boys would last longer than the Beatles. And I was right. I thought, oh man, you're crazy. There's Beatles, the Beach Boys don't compare to the Beatles. And then, but then, that was before I discovered Pet Sounds and sort of got to know it all, And what was really interesting is I was about 10 years ago, I was reading an interview with Sean Lennon, right, John's son, who's a musician. And the interviewer asked, who's the most influential musician in your life? And he said, Brian Wilson. And so I was like, I got to let my dad know that. He'll appreciate that one. Okay,
there certainly is still a strong relationship between Paul McCartney and Brian. They were good friends at the time, and also competitors. I mean, and John as well. They went back and forth about it. He actually saw the movie and, just loved he was very great about responding to it. And I think just relating to that whole thing that Brian went through on a personal level. So.
Wow. Anyway, so thank you so much. It's a great movie. We got a line here, people. So come on up, tell them your name so he knows who you're talking to, and we'll go until he disappeared. We'll go until you're tired. I mean, generally we go about 45 minutes to an hour. If you start to get tired, just let us know.
Okay.
Hi, Bill. I'm kind of short. Hi, my name's Laura. It's nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you.
I agree with what Duane said, though. In Love and Mercy, I loved how you made me feel like I was in Brian's head through sound. Like, if I were to, I closed my eyes during part of the movie, and I could, feel what he was feeling, which I think was communicated awesome, perfectly. But honestly, my question for you is, Duane mentioned that like we're kind of like jaded, you know, that like
You're not jaded.
that's true, but well, I get, yeah, not jaded, you're right. But I guess my question is, as far as producing goes, what is the biggest challenge to you? Like my biggest fear, I guess, in producing is getting people to finance a project that I believe in. You know, and that makes me really nervous. So for you, what is your biggest fear, or the hardest thing for you to overcome in producing or directing, and how have you done that since you started producing and directing? How have you overcome that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the financing thing, again, that gets back to it's a tough business, and I wish there was some way around it. And I wish I could say it's getting better, but I would have to say that it's getting worse or harder. I mean, it's just for independent film right now because of what's going on with television and, you know, other, you know, it's just the movie business has kind of gravitated to this thing where it's all tent poles or the rare independent film that gets it. I mean, there was a 5-10 years ago, independent film was much more vital than it is now, to be honest. More people would go out to see a movie like, I don't know, I mean, you know, some of these more obscure movies that you would think would never get made today. I don't know. I mean, it's more than 10 years ago, but Remains of the Day or some of these quieter, you know, movies that are very, you know, they're radical. They're just hard to make anymore. You know, you have to have something big or something, you know, not that everything has to be La La Land or something, but you know, there has to be something that really makes it rise above. And so if you've got just a great movie or a great script that you're trying to get made, it's tough. You got to be able to sell it. You got to be able to push your passion and your belief in it. And it really is true. You know, it sounds corny, but that part of it really is true. If you've got to have a passion behind it and really be able to push it and make people believe who wouldn't easily believe it, that your film is going to be great or it's worthwhile and you're able to kind of sell the idea. It's just harder now. So I have to tell you, unfortunately.
No, you're fine.
We struggle with it all the time too, and we're in it. So
Yeah, it makes sense. So what do you feel like has been your biggest, or is your biggest challenge with producing, directing? Do you think it's the financing, or do you feel like there's another aspect that's really challenging for you?
I mean, for me right now, it's financing. I mean, it's putting the deals together. I mean, River Road has, you know, we've gotten into a position where we can provide some financing ourselves, but that doesn't help. You still have to make the business work for you. You still have to go out and do foreign sales, or there's this various ways of putting financing packages together. And you have to be able to go out and do that. Otherwise the film's not going to make sense. Even if somebody gave you whatever, $1 million, $10 million, $20 million, it's not going to, you know, you're not going to be well spent if you don't have the thing put together so that there's distributors involved or foreign sales people involved. You know, you got to make the whole business side of it work. And that is the toughest. I mean, you know, it's tough to come up with a movie, to be honest, come up with an idea and a script that's worth making. That is super tough. But, you know, we've got 3 of them now that I really believe in and that we're still having trouble putting together just because of the environment right now. So you got to be able to do both, unfortunately. Find the great material, develop it, and then push the sales on it.
Sweet. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hi, Bill. My name is Bronson.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Hi, how's it going? Good. And I just had a question on the Love and Mercy is a period, like a double period film.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was wondering what part of making a period film, maybe for this project specifically, was more easy or more difficult than just doing a regular, like a present day film?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing, of course, is when you're dealing with the period thing, you have to make everything look of that period, which sounds, you know, basic, but it's true. You get into a lot of trouble trying to find locations where, you know, you only see this or that. You know, you're having to work the logistics of working around modern day things. Certainly with Love and Mercy, a lot of it was going on in a studio and things like that. So you have more controlled environment. Incredibly, the studio that Brian actually recorded his pet sounds and all that is still looking pretty much like it did. And so we were able to go in for relatively little money and make that look like the time. But of course, once you step outside onto the streets of Los Angeles, it's like completely different. And so you're having to work around things and signage and modern day things, all that kind of thing. Not to mention, wardrobe and all the other aspects of production design. It's intensive, but it's fun too. It's really fun, and that's part of, I think, the passion for it. I think was, I kind of grew up in that period, so I loved the idea of going back to that and trying to recreate what it looked like back then, both in the studio and on the streets. But you're always working with your budget and what you can afford, to do and where. I mean, to be honest, when we're putting this together, and you'll find this as you go into making movies, there's budget-wise, people are going to try to tell you, the producers are going to tell you that you got to go to New Orleans or something like that, Louisiana, because they have the best, incentives right now to lower your budget. But then you're facing making the Beach Boys movie in Louisiana. It just doesn't seem right. So we had to work around all those kind of things to make it work in Los Angeles.
Nice.
But that's all part of it. And
awesome. Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jazzer, and I have 2 questions. So, as far as directing and producing Love and Mercy, the movie is really awesome, by the way. And what was the most difficult part of the process, and what would you have done differently?
What? Sorry. What was the first part?
Oh, what was as far as directing and producing the movie, what was the most difficult part of it?
I don't know. I mean, I look back on Love and Mercy now, and maybe I'm glossing over things, but I thought it was fantastic. I had a great time, and it's not always that easy. I've been involved in a lot of movies where it's painful, on a daily basis almost. But again, I mentioned the spirit of it, and everybody, the crew, everybody was kind of in the right frame of mind, and it wasn't easy because you have challenges every day, huge challenges. But there was nothing about it that I would do differently, so to speak. It kind of all worked well. I mean, certainly I love producing. I mean, I love directing. And so the producing side, where you're having to deal with the budget and deal with all these, other things, the business side of it, that's not my favorite part. But I love the directing part. And to be honest, some people then break it down to, do you like shooting, the production part, or do you like the editing and all that other stuff? And I honestly, again, not to sound corny, but I love them both. I mean, production has a real kind of energy to it, where you have to get everything done on a strict time frame, but you're creating it right then. Then you get into post, and it's a little more relaxed, but you're not shooting anymore, but you're still creating this thing by the way you put it together. So they're both exciting, and I'd love to be doing those things every day, all the day, every time. So
that's cool. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
How's it going, Bill?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. So I had a question. It's about Paul. How was it working with Paul? He's such an incredible actor. Did he, how much time did he spend for the role? And how much did you have to kind of direct him, or was he really kind of rely on himself, or how did that work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as you know, every actor is different, and they all bring a different personality to the table and different techniques of how they do their work. With Paul, it was very easy, to be honest, and I hate to keep saying this because it's part of, when I say this project was blessed, it was blessed with a lot of great people, and Paul was one of them. Again, we connected right away. We had a really good kind of working relationship. And he's also very easygoing. Not all actors are that way, let me tell you, for sure. I've got a lot of other stories about other people, but Paul was a super earnest guy, and he's serious about his work, but he's not like overly serious where he's like putting on a bunch of, stressful stuff on everybody. This was, you know, he knew what he had to do. He would go in, you know, certainly prepared for it. We spent a lot of time in advance of him practicing piano and singing and working with the guys. We had them go kind of through band camp or whatever you want to call it. So that part of it. But as far as the actual working through the acting thing, it's just a lot of conversation. I mean, we did some rehearsals, but it's mostly a lot of conversation. Just him and I talking about Brian and bouncing ideas off each other about who he was. In this case, of course, we had the real Brian Wilson to kind of look to. But, you know, you still need to find that. He needed to find it for himself, you know, the kind of inner Brian, so to speak.
Yeah.
That's why it was interesting to work with both Paul and John Cusak, who, you know, playing the same character, you don't get that much in these kind of situations. So it really was about letting them both find their own way to it, and they had very different techniques, but you know, hopefully both worked.
One more quick question. So did Paul and John kind of mix and mingle ideas, or did they kind of run the character by each other? Or I know you had a base character of the actual character, but
no, I mean, when we made the decision to have the role, those two parts of Brian's life played by different actors. I mean, we could have had them played by one actor, just makeup, you know, try to age them up and down. But to me, it was more interesting to have two different actors play it. And I thought, if we were going to go to that degree, have two actors play it, then let's go even further. Let's push it further, and let's not have them coordinate their performances. Just, you know, so they actually never met until Paul's last day of shooting, John's first day of shooting. And, you know, because I didn't want them to start looking at each other's performance and start picking up affectations or something like that. Oh, yeah, let's both scratch our, you know, faces like this or something, you know. You know, just find their own way to it. And Paul, again, Paul never met Brian until after, whereas John spent a lot of time with the real Brian. And so they both, again, had those different techniques of doing it. But thankfully, it worked out that they kind of came together and made sense, hopefully.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Bill. I'm Brandon.
Hey.
It's great to meet you. I am studying to be a producer just like you. And I was asking, or I was wondering what aspect of producing that I should focus the most on in order to get great films made. Because as producer, that's what you want to do, is get great films made. So I was wondering, what piece of producing would you say I should focus on the most, get this part down, so I can get to the fun part of producing?
Well, I mean, as far as the different parts of producing, you know, I'm not sure exactly how to break that down. As far as how to get there, how to work your way into it. I mean, for me, you know, a producer, because there's all sorts of producers these days. People can bring different skills to it, and I don't know what your skills are exactly or what you're going to be developing. Sure. But there really are a number of ways to do it. I think, first of all, the most important thing is your passion for what you're doing and your enthusiasm for doing it. I mean, a lot of people start off being PAs or, you know, production assistants and, I don't know, set or something like that. And a lot of it is, you know, kind of basic work. And you see a lot of people get into those positions and they, you know, they're a little bit like, oh, this is beneath me or something like that. And they'll do a lot of things reluctantly. The guys, the people that you really gravitate to are the people who take those really basic things and very enthusiastic and want to do, you know, the best job, whatever they can do in those things. And then you start rising up. If you do that kind of thing and people, you work well with people, people will give you different jobs and kind of you work your way up. To be a producer, that's personally how I would do it. The other way to do it is just simply to get, you know, friends or hook up with other people and make your own movie, and you're producing it, you know, kind of from the ground up. So it's a very simple, you know, production at first, and they build and build. But, you know, for me, that's what it's about. I mean, first of all, it definitely has to be about a passion for your work, as opposed to a lot of other people get involved in it for the wrong reasons, and they get frustrated or go off in the wrong paths. It's if you're into making movies and the production work, you'll succeed. So.
Awesome. That really answered my question. Thank you. I have one other kind of different question. You were talking about financing earlier, and I was wondering how you create a financing / distribution package. Like, is there a way that you learned how to do that, or is it just through experience?
I mean, it's through experience in the sense that you got to really, I mean, you're starting from, unless you have some opportunity somewhere, or you're working with some company or some production, you're probably going to start with either your own film or working with some people. And it usually ends up, you go out and ask people for money. And hopefully it's not a lot of money.
Okay.
But you still have to go out and ask friends and family or people that you might get connected to give you money. And I don't know. I don't know that everybody would give this advice, but to me, I've heard so many people do this, and I've either done it or tried to avoid doing it, where you go out and try to sell somebody like, we're gonna go to Sundance, and this is gonna be like the Blair Witch Project or something, where we're gonna make a lot of money.
Right.
And you just can't do that. You can't promise people that, because the likelihood of that happening is very slim. What you want to do, you want to have a good package that people can buy off on, but they also want to present yourself where they're buying off on you, because that's why people should be doing it. They want to support you or your team of filmmakers. You're not promising them to make a lot of money. You're just saying, look, support me in this, and that, because you just can't promise any kind of profit, or it's just not realistic at this stage. So.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It wouldn't be honest to just say this is going to win for sure.
Yeah, a lot of people do that. Yeah. I mean, it's not good, because the people who have financed movies before can see right through that, and the people who haven't, that's irresponsible to kind of try to.
So you're saying what I should do is, if once I have something that I feel so passionately about, this movie has to be made, just go ask people for money.
Yeah, I mean, again, hopefully you start at a reasonable level, and it's a film that can be made for a reasonable budget.
Sure.
You're not going to go out and start making a multi-million-dollar movie right off the bat. I mean, it's possible you could do that, but then you're having to go to much bigger people and people who know what the business is all about, and actually sell them your idea.
Right.
It's a harder deal. Sometimes it can be done, but it's harder. I would recommend starting with a small, reasonable film. You do a good job on that, and people see that, and then you build from there.
I like it. Thank you so much, Bill. It was great to talk to you.
Same here.
Ooh. Hello.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
This is fun. So my wife told me to tell you that I'm not in film school, so that maybe I don't understand all the jargon or whatever. I just came with her today to hang out. But I have a couple questions. John Cusak and Paul Dano, they look pretty similar, like pretty remarkable. I think, at least, they look pretty similar. Was there a process for that? How did that go about?
No, just the opposite. I'm glad to hear you say that. But to be honest, a lot of people were like, what? Those guys don't look like at all. They were like, when we're first showing the movie, when you're editing and all that, and you're showing kind of a rough cut of the thing, you don't know how people are going to react at all. And a lot of people, when it's unfinished, a lot of people were, well, those people don't look alike at all. But, it's somehow the finished work, and it somehow works together. But definitely, we did not do anything to make them look
right.
alike. I avoided that on purpose. Right.
I don't know. Maybe that's the whole, these people are critics and I'm just an average moviegoer. And, I thought they looked the same to me, but, whatever. Also, how did you find, going back to a period piece, I thought that was pretty, I know this is like a weird thing to stand out, but I thought that the, like having a brand new 1980s Cadillac, like how did you do that?
Well, believe it or not, there's a lot of people out there who collect these cars. And so, again, lucky enough to have a transportation department on the film who can go out and look for these things and kind of scoured Southern California for these kind of Cadillacs. But to be honest, there wasn't a huge selection because, you know, you have a particular idea of what you want. I mean, there's a theme to the movie of the color blue. And we were looking for this particular kind of blue and also, but they're out there. It's just, and that's, you know, if you're not a big movie person, or even if you are, it's like one of the beautiful things about the movie business, as crazy as it is that you get together on a movie and there's like 100 people or more that get together and that don't necessarily work together all the time. Most of them have never worked together at all, but they come together for this one project. They do their jobs. They're very good at their jobs, and they do these things and they somehow click together as a group. It's really remarkable when that happens and when it happens well. And that's one of those examples, things like the transportation department.
Right. I just thought that was a cool detail. One other thing, Tyson Ritter from All American Rejects was in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And during the credits, he was credited as hipster #1. How did he feel about that?
Okay. He was a good guy, actually. I mean, it's fun to go through this process with, you know, auditioning people and all that. And
Yeah.
he was obviously a standout guy that I thought, you know, we needed to work into the movie somehow. He's a wild guy. But I like him, and I think he worked out well in the film. So.
Was he acting at all? Or is that just, you know, like him?
No, I think he did a good job. He really did. Honestly, I mean, he obviously is a different character, you know, on his own. But
Been to concerts several times. He gets wild.
So,
But anyway, that's all from me. Thank you.
thank you. Sure.
Do we have anyone after Mandy? Maybe this is the last one.
Hello,
Hi.
my name is Mandy, and that was my husband. It's always interesting to me to see the kinds of questions that non-film school people ask, so that's why I thought. So for me, I produce. That's mostly what I do here at school, and I've done a couple shorts. And then last semester, I took my I had to take a director's workshop class, and so I had to direct my first thing. And it was a nightmare because I didn't know how to turn off like the producer brain, because it's like, oh, I don't have the time for that. I don't have the budget for that. So how did you do that? Like, did you have some kind of process to be like, oh, I can't think about that? Like, or were you just like constantly, it sounds like it'd be terrible, but.
No, I mean, I definitely had that in mind beforehand. I knew that was going to be an issue because it is hard to change hats like that. And, you know, thankfully there were other people on the film and other people that I work with on a regular basis. And I was able to, you know, tell everybody, look, you know, my job here is directing primarily. And, you know, particularly in production and post, that's what my priority has to be. And I need you guys to push back on me like producers are supposed to do. I don't want to have to be pushing back on myself or thinking about that myself. I want to be able to fight with somebody about, you know, how long we're going to go here, or how much we're going to spend there, or whatever. I think the producer-director dynamic is important, and it's hard to do it yourself. It really benefits the project and the process to have that kind of fight going on, or that conflict.
Right. Yeah. And you keep saying that it was really fun and sort of easy, but I can imagine that having a cast like Paul Giamatti and John Cusak really helps. I mean, did you find yourself having to put a lot of direction into them? I'm sure that they probably do a lot of their own. I just kept noticing all of John's tics and stuff that he was doing.
No, I mean, the good thing is I think it's easy to get overwhelmed by some of these guys and think, oh, well, you know, Cusak, he's, you know, the number of things he's done over the years, and Paul Giamatti and all that. I mean, any director, whatever their level of experience, could get like, oh, you know. But there was something about this project, and I hope I can do it on the others, and I kind of recommend others getting into that habit of just feeling confidence, and you got to go with it. If you start questioning yourself or thinking, oh, Paul Giamatti, you're somehow getting overwhelmed by it, you know, you're just going to kind of, it's going to affect the process. Your job is to be, you know, to have a vision for the film and to go for it. You want to interact with people and certainly work off each other, but you can't let other, you know, you can't let somebody who has a lot of experience come in and kind of push you in a different direction. So it's important to keep that confidence and not, you know, get overwhelmed by it. So.
And then one more question. My one of my best friends that I've met here wants to be a production designer, and so now, just hanging out with her, I pick up on a lot of that stuff now. And so I'm very curious about like that headboard was amazing, and then like the piano in the sand. Is there like, was there specific pieces that you actually took from the history, or did you guys just kind of do your own thing?
Most of it, you know, because Brian's history is, you know, reasonably well documented, and it's part of his kind of whole thing. Like the bed, you know, there's actually film of him in the bed. He was actually on Saturday Night Live, came one time and shot something while he was in his bed. So, you know, as production designer, we go in, you know, and kind of research all that. And then, you know, actually that bed, we reconstructed it, you know, did it ourselves. We didn't have the bed itself to work with. So we built that bed, and the sand, that kind of thing, Brian actually did that. He actually did put his piano in a sandbox. And we had some, not great pictures of it, but we had some references. And so we just kind of tried to work it into the set that we had and the house that we had. And it was fun. That stuff was really a great, again, another wonderful part of the film, just being able to play with all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I want that bed now. But well, thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I've got one more question, but anyone have any? All right, we got Bill. We got one more person coming down, and then I have one for you.
Okay.
Does that sound okay?
Sure, absolutely.
Hey, Bill. I'm John. So I just had one question, kind of a little bit about where the industry's going these days.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of want to know what your opinion is on cinematic universes. I feel like, you know, today they're very good money makers and they get a lot of people to fill a lot of seats, but I feel at the same time they kind of kill good cinema, like good stories that are out there. So then you go and you have like a whole year go by and you have a lot of superhero movies, another Star Wars movie, and they're good, but you don't really get very original pieces like, you know, like what you put out with Love and Mercy and stuff like that, and people don't really hear about it. I just kind of want to know what your view is on that, and where do you think that's taking the industry to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, I hate to keep saying, but it is tough, and it's tougher these days. To be honest, we have a film that's out now that I think is really good, a really great film, actually. It's called The Monster Calls. Juan Antonio Bayona, who did a film called The Orphanage and then one called The Impossible, did this film, and we helped him with it, and it's really great. It's got great reviews, and people who see it really like it, but it's done zero business, basically, you know, with everything else out right now, the competitive landscape, and the fact that people honestly aren't as willing to go out and take chances on movies as they used to. They'll go, if they hear something is really fantastic, they might go to see it, but they're less apt to take a chance on a movie now, which makes it really hard for some of the smaller independent movies that might be great, but they just, you know, whatever, they don't have the bandwidth or whatever. And so, you know, it's really frustrating to make a movie like A Monster Calls that's really a good movie and it's doing no business. You know, it's just such a shame. So I don't know. In some ways you can be really depressed about it. I do get depressed about it, but this is the business we're in. It's going through a period of change. What I'm most interested in is content, and hopefully storytelling is always going to have merit and value to it. You got to just keep, your eye on that ball. You don't want to do things that are ridiculous. I mean, you can't just say, well, I'm just going to keep my eye on, small, great films. You just have to work hard to figure out a way to make them marketable and give them every chance in the marketplace. But, that makes it more complicated, but I don't want to give up either. The experience of going into a movie theater with other people and having this, this storytelling experience, this emotional experience, it moved me many times in my life, and I want to do that for other people. I want to keep that going. So I'm not going to give up on it, and I hope, you guys don't either. We all kind of keep going for it. We just maybe have to set a higher standard to make sure that we make good things, and we work hard to get them out there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
That almost moved me to tears, Bill. I think we should just maybe stop right there. What a great answer. I do, but I won't. I gotta ask you one more thing, and that is about the concept of the biopic, because the biopic is typically a very hard thing to pull off. There's always been very sort of problematic biographical films, and this one succeeds, I think, in spades. As does I'm Not There. Thinking of and so what do you think when going into this film? What were some of your thoughts of things that you wanted to make, or not necessarily going into this film, but just for you? What are some rules of thumb when you're trying to do a biographical story in a film that you feel work?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I said from the beginning that I don't like biopics or whatever. I would say that all the time. And the reason I don't, because your typical biopic, by its nature, ends up, you're usually dealing with a very interesting subject or some dramatic person or something. But the problem is, and could have happened very easily on Brian, that they have such a big life. If you try to tell the whole story from birth to death, so to speak, there's no opportunity to get personal, to get intimate with the subject and really kind of get to know it. So we threw that out. It was like, we're not doing that.
Right.
We're figure out some way to paint a portrait of this guy without telling the whole story and just kind of suggesting things about a particular period in his life, or in this case, 2 periods in his life, and hope that tells the whole story in a way. Doesn't tell each individual chapter of his life, but it tells hopefully about him a little better than the biopic would do.
Right.
But it's not easy, it's, there's other true stories that we're working on right now that have that same problem of how to capture that without telling the whole story, but also telling enough of it that really it hits you and it means something.
Yeah, it's a fine line, and you did great. And it's a great movie, and I can't thank you enough. You're very generous to have spent your time here with us. Thank you for giving us your time. We really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Sorry I can't be there in person to meet you all, but I appreciate the time and good
Well,
luck.
if you're ever in Park City for Sundance or something, let us know.
Okay.
We'd love to have you. So
Well,
thank you so much, and everyone, a big round of applause for Mr. Pohlad. And we'll let you get some sleep.
okay. Thanks very much.
Good luck with all the projects.
Thank you. You too.